Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and this is episode 73. Specifically, this is one of our True Change Alliance D.A.R.E series, where we really get to elevate a new way of thinking. Today, we talk to Dr. Khyle Wooten. Dr. Wooten is a newly minted doctorate. He's working at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and his research area is amazing. We're talking incredible words like Afrofuturism and womanistic ethic. And in this conversation, we'll talk about how we as a profession can elevate music of all kinds, specifically Dr. Wooten's research area, which is music of Black women composers. You will leave this episode with books that you can read to do your work, with composers and conductors that you can explore, and so much more. I really love what Dr. Wooten says at the end, so make sure you stick through for that inspirational moment. And don't worry, Dr. Wooten will be back when his database of Black women composers is finished. But that's enough of me. This episode is brought to you by our friends at True Change Alliance. I'm so thankful that they are helping us all rise to a new level and challenge ourselves to think in new ways. Without further ado, Dr. Khyle Wooten, and they still rise. Today on the Music Ed Matters podcast, we have a special True Change Alliance D.A.R.E series guest, Dr. Khyle Wooten. Hello, Dr. Wooten.
Hello, Emmy. How are you?
I'm thrilled to be having this conversation. It's a Friday afternoon, and I am stoked. It's like happy hour podcast recording.
Yes.
Okay, you have to tell all the listeners, because I'm so excited. Where are you? What are you doing? Who is Dr. Khyle Wooten?
Who's Dr. Khyle Wooten? I'm originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So I'm a hashtag Philly World kid, straight from 51st Street. Most recently, I'm coming from Tallahassee, Florida, where I wrapped up my doctorate in music education at Florida State University. Prior to that, I lived 5 years in Atlanta, Georgia, where I got a master's in choral conducting from Georgia State University. I stayed in the area to do K-8 general and vocal music with National Heritage Academies in Clayton County Public Schools. So I'm currently the Associate Director of Choral Activities at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. I'm brand spanking new to the Knoxville area and at UT as well. So we're into week 3 and we're having a good time.
Yes. Okay. So first of all, Philly, one of my favorite places, the Reading Terminal. OMG, I could eat every meal in the Reading Terminal.
Reading Terminal. Okay, so there are a couple of spots that you have to hit. First of all is Tommy DeNick's. You think the cheesesteaks are good in the Reading Terminal market? You have to have the roast pork sandwich with broccoli rabe. It is to die for. It's to live for.
I hope y'all are taking notes. We're going on a field trip to Philly.
I have had Tommy DeNick's for lunch and dinner on several occasions, particularly on my excursions back home. And for anybody listening, if you are really pressed for a cheesesteak, I invite you to go to Max's or D'Alessandro's. A lot of people think that Pat's and Gino's are the way to go. Those are the tourist spots. But if you want something from a real hashtag Philly World kid like me, Max's or D'Alessandro's is the best bet. So
yum.
Reading
now
Terminal,
it has been laid out.
Reading Terminal, water ice, cheesesteaks, Tommy DeNick's, gourmet sandwiches, pretzels, and cookies. You're gonna have it in abundance. I mean, there are 1,000 different places to go in that little square, but good times. I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Oh, I love it. You say Philly, and I just immediately imagine it's one of my favorite cities to run in, and I love going up there to visit. I can't imagine living there growing up. I bet that was so cool.
It was, and downtown was a real sanctuary for me, even though I'm from West Philly. So, and whenever I tell somebody that, they always plug in West Philadelphia, born and raised. So shout out to the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but that's me.
I was thinking Philly. It, but I didn't want to sing it and mess it up.
Yes, so shout out to that theme song. But I'm a West Philly kid, straight from 51st Street, and when I consider where I come from and the musical experiences that I've had growing up against what I am doing now, it just makes me very grateful.
So tell me, how was Philly in comparison to Atlanta? What were some of the similarities and differences? You can talk about just life or also musically.
Both big cities, both really big hubs for the arts. So I'll have to premise this. I did not have a music education in the public schools. I grew up in the school district of Philadelphia, and I did not have music in the classroom beyond fifth grade.
Whoa.
So my grandparents, rest their souls, supplemented my music education by sending me to the Gibson School of Music and Arts, which is in the greater North Philadelphia area on 5th and Alany. Shout out to Professor Randy Gibson and Carrie Lissen. I went to Gibson School from grades 7 up until I graduated high school for piano and voice lessons. And from that little, place that I call it the White House in the middle of Fifth Street, I got so many experiences to sing in choirs of hundreds of people in connection with the Philadelphia Heritage Chorale, the Philadelphia Orchestra, getting experience as a minister of music at a young age in various churches. So that little place holding all of those connections. I'm making a transfer to my life in Atlanta now, where my life in the church really yielded all of these meaningful music experiences, particularly with the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, headed by Bishop Yvette Flunder. Mm-hmm. My time in Georgia State really branched off into me doing some accompaniment work for the students of Morehouse College. Creating my own recital series for the works of vocal and choral works of Black composers called the Sankofa Recital Series, doing chorus work with the Atlanta Opera. So Philly and Atlanta were both places that made me feel incredibly alive for a young creative like myself. I moved to Atlanta when I was 24, 25, like fresh out of 2 years of high school teaching. And when I decided I wanted a master's degree, I wanted it to be in a really thriving metropolitan area, and Atlanta gave me just that.
I love how you're bringing these two cities together and these unique and different educational and musical experiences. And now your students at UT Knoxville get to experience that, which is such a cool lived experience to bring to them. How's that going?
I can say this, the way the students have really received me, particularly those in my high school choral methods class and conducting class. I also teach 2 ensembles here, which are UT singers. That's the flagship choir, and then the undergraduate mixed choir, the concert choir. Having this really talented student community receive my perspective as a music educator from a Title I background, not just as a teacher, but as a student, and these communities where students receive free and reduced lunch, and where we're seeing a heavy concentration of Black and Brown students. I am glad that I am in an environment where I can espouse certain philosophies on music education about who deserves to learn and who do we get to serve and how do we use all the tools at our disposal as music educators to give the very best to everyone that's sitting in our rehearsal rooms.
That's a perfect. So we're going to loop back to that at the end. So y'all listen
Yes.
in. We're going to come back and talk about Dr. Wooten's hopes for the profession, especially in regards to diversity and equity and inclusion. But can we talk a second about your research? Because there is some dynamite stuff that the people listening are going to gather. I love the title of your most recent presentation, And Still They Rise, exploring and advocating for choral music of Black women composers. Tell us what you know. What can we walk away from this conversation with?
Okay, so This project, this presentation was birthed out of my dissertation process with focusing on a specific Black female composer. But I chose the title for a few reasons. So, and Still I Rise is obviously taken from the Maya Angelou text. So shout out to our beloved Maya Angelou, a literary ancestor for me. Also, I'm thinking about the Persephone Powell bop. Still I rise, still I rise. So shout out to Dr. Powell. But
maybe this will get her on the podcast.
Yes. My journey with discovering the choral works of Black women composers really took on a life of its own before I got to Florida State. So when I started my own recital series, Sankofa, with several of my Georgia State alum friends, the first go round of it was really special because not only did we get to write works for several of our friends, we also got to tap in to some of the more lesser known works. And if anybody knows me, knows that I always take up for the underdog, as it were, and the lesser known choral and orchestral works of Black composers. But finding a research home in Black women composers is birthed out of my own experience with Black women being there every step of the way in my music education. My mother was my first music teacher, and she taught me hymns. She taught me hymns at bedtime. She taught me how to hold my fingers at a piano. She taught me little rote songs, at bath time. And so my mom was,
so cool.
She was our first minister of music for our family church. And so I would always sit beside mommy at the organ. So I got it really earnest.
You legit got that from your mom.
And so every step of the way through middle school and high school and college experiences, I've seen Black women teaching voice, Black women at the podium, Black women composing music. And so it really clicked for me during my time in Atlanta when I really got to make the most out of my master's thesis, which was an analysis of a couple of works by Margaret Bonds, Ballad of the Brown King, Persephone Powell's The Cry of Jeremiah. Had I not really leaned in to my authentic experiences, I would not have pursued something like this, but for FMEA anyways, let alone grad school. So in the project and Still They Rise, it works like a reading session. And so we had a great time doing that virtually, where I was able to put up scores in real time for all the attendees. And the backdrop information really stems out of the scholarship of Professor Hildred Roach, who's Professor Emerita at the University of the District of Columbia, Mildred Denby Green, who wrote the book Black Women Composers, A Genesis. And then there's Eileen Southern, who wrote The Music of Black Americans. And so from those three essential texts, so if anyone's thinking about doing more research on Black women composers, though that is required reading. The Music of Black Americans, Eileen Southern, Black Women Composers, A Genesis, Mildred Denby Green, and Black American Music, Past and Present by Hildred Roach. So from those three works, I really went for the earliest presence of African American music by women, which starts as early as the mid 1800s in the New England sector of the United States. And so this great tradition kind of trickles down to to accomplishments by Helen Eugenia Hagen, who was the first Black a graduate of the Yale School of Music, and who was an incredible concert pianist, going down the timeline to the presence of Florence Price. And and now we are seeing a huge rediscovery, as it were, particularly along the works of Florence Price and Margaret Bonds. And my dissertation research took me to a little lady named Lena McLin. And so I included her anthem, Let the People Sing Praise Unto the Lord, which was a 1973 anthem. It's what I did with this project is that I wanted to lift up accessibility factors for the music of Black women composers, and so I lifted up some offerings from from Patsy Ford Sims. And for you music educators out there who have collected developmental music throughout your career, you know the name Patsy Ford Sims. And for the longest time, I did not know that Patsy Ford Sims was a Black woman.
Did you find out?
Yeah. And so it was like one of those things, where people say, I was today years old when. And so about 5 years ago for me, that was a today years old moment to know that the music that I was collecting for my own choirs in elementary and middle school, most of that, and when I go to J.W. Pepper and type in the name Patsy Ford Sims, oh my God, pages on pages on pages, pieces on pieces on pieces for every kind of occasion possible. I also lifted some of the works of composer B.E. Boykin, who is now assistant professor of music at Georgia Tech. I included Lena McLin's "Let the People Sing Praise Unto the Lord," and I also offered "Bright is the Ring of Words," which is a tenor bass work by Dr. Persephone Powell. So that was a really cool virtual reading session where we got to see some lesser known works by Black women composers, but also considering accessibility factors, how there isn't divisi flying all over the place, from measure to measure, and that there are considerable and accessible vocal ranges for various types of choirs. And so that is a project that I'm definitely looking forward to expanding as I come across more music of choral music that is of Black women composers.
That was going to be my next question. Do you have a database you can share? Because I'm just thinking my developing choirs would love to see that, because I love to try to get composers that look like the people in the choir so everyone gets a chance to see themselves. And it would be great for some of these to be accessible to my middle school, high school kids.
Yes, that database is in progress for me. It got halted by a little thing called a dissertation.
Oh, yeah, dissertation and new job. Both of those will put appropriate halts on things.
Yep, there was a hard stop on that one. I was quickly getting my life together, and that whole whirlwind of affairs has taken me to where I am now. So I'm happy to jump back on that.
Like, it's gonna come back.
Yes, please come back to me.
Okay, so you'll give us an update. We'll have to have like a take two when that is all ready to share and get it out to the universe.
Oh my God, I'd love that. Thank you.
That would be so much fun. I would really love that. I'm excited to see what you come up with, because I think it's such a community effort as we all are doing this research. And I love how you say offered a piece of music or brought up a piece. I just love how it's all about elevating and bringing people to the table. It's not pushing people away, but making the table bigger.
Yeah, I only say offering because, in no way, shape, or form do I consider myself an expert. Obviously, there are levels, to this, levels to scholarship, junior scholarship, senior scholarship, and, all the things in the middle. And my journey is just a beginning. But I often tell people these days, I am so happy to have a research home in the choral works of Black women composers. It is really one of the joys of my life as an academic and as a creative. And the two aren't separate for me.
No, they're very much married. You gave a great word in the pre-conversation we were having. How does Afrofuturistic and womanistic ethic, how do those play together?
So I have come to these kind of two thought worlds and realms of experience by way of my own experience. And so I leaned into it a little bit in previous parts of this conversation. So I'll start with the more prevalent theme of just womanism, which is defined as a type of feminism that acknowledges the abilities and the contributions of Black women. And so this is where, I often pause within myself to give thanks to the many Black women who have lined my journey with their wisdom, with their offerings, with their presence on the podium, which spoke to so much about how one can move in this profession. Black women were my first music teachers. I lifted up my mother, Jennifer Wooten, of course, but I lift up other names. Patricia Harper Tilden, who was my very first general and vocal music educator at Wilson Elementary School in Southwest Philly. I will never forget her. In fact, I invited her to my dissertation defense, and
So cool.
and I included a portion of my acknowledgments in my actual document to thank her for being persistent, for seeing something in us, and for drawing out the very best in us. I took as any music education person would, an intro to education class when I was an undergrad. And so shout out to Dr. Emery Petchower, who taught this class. And he reminded us of the Latin root word educare, from which we get education, and it means to draw out. Mm. And when I think of that, that very actionable thing, my mind always goes back to Patricia Harper Tilden, who stayed in the trenches of Philadelphia, School District of Philadelphia, for 40 years. And she gave us the very best of what we had, whether we were learning solfege, whether we were doing rote songs, whether we were learning very early on as, second, third, fourth, and fifth graders, how to read music, handbells. And it was an incredible experience. And I looked forward to it. That 90-minute session, 3 days a week, changed my life. Mm. She changed my life. I offered the name Carrie Lassen, who was my voice teacher at the Gibson School of Music and Arts. I lift up other names, Black women choral conductors, Jillian Harrison Jones, who's one of my best friends in the world, Dr. Jan Taylor at Prairie View A&M University, Dewala Simmons Burke at Winston-Salem State University, Gloria Quinlan, Denise Payton. Black women have always been there for me, showing me that I can make it. Janella Edmonds of Virginia State University, particularly the names of the women that I'm offering now, particularly in my HBCU experience at Lincoln University, I was part of a wonderful collegiate honor choir called the 105 Voices of History. And that's where I had these experiences with these dynamic women on the podium. And they gave us the very best of what we had. And I will never, ever, ever, ever forget it. And so that those formative experiences helped me lean into a type of advocacy for Black women's experiences in this profession. And it's a womanist ethic for me. It's a way for me to acknowledge, of course, and I'm coming, into this womanist ethic and learning more about it and just saying yes to what comes up by way of my own experiences as a man.
Right.
And so I've often felt like it's weird to talk about feminism or Black feminism, in a way that, like, okay, I'm a man, talking about, women's experiences. And I often feel unworthy to, but um, I cannot help but thank Black women.
Mm-hmm.
I
Where does
cannot help but thank them.
I love that you are highlighting so many people that we all need to go dig into and find and thank as well. How does the Afrofuturistic title tie into that? Where is the overlap of those two?
Okay, so Afrofuturism is how do I want to explain this? So a more centralized definition of this, and I'll read this. It says, um, Afrofuturism evaluates the past and future to create better conditions for the present generation of Black people through the use of technology that's often presented through art, music, and literature. Afrofuturism emerges as a guide to push society into a future full of Black empowerment. And I can make the easiest transfer, I can make to this is um, my my experience as a student. Well, back in those days, it was all about STEM, and then by
Mm-hmm.
the time I got to high school, then came STEAM, which was including the arts and more science and mathematical and technological experiences in public school classrooms. And STEAM was a very big part of my life, particularly um, in high school, where I got to start a choir because there was no choir. I
Cool.
got to I got to start a music club because there were no music classes, and there weren't a lot of resources, but I used my experiences. I fielded for people who had similar interests, and so that meant everything to us, particularly for those of us coming along in Title I environments. So another transfer, I can make to this is how we've obviously have had to lean into the use of technology in the global pandemic over the
Mm-hmm.
past year and a half. And I cannot tell you how proud I am of the profession at large for leaning into technology, for the success of our conferences, for the
Mm-hmm.
success of our rehearsals, for the success of our performances, and how to include this technology in our day-to-day practices. And I got to see that in abundance with my Black colleagues in music education from K all the way to the university setting. And the pride that emerged, the pride
Mm-hmm.
that came up for me watching them, take Zoom on, full speed ahead,
Yes.
and using technologies that lent itself to synchronous singing and meeting in order to give the very best to our students. And so, particularly through the use of technology, I think there is a way forward for Black people in the arts to produce a future. And so, Afrofuturism is obviously not just limited to technology, but our workings in literature and art also help us to look back. And so if we're talking about looking back, I offer the term, the West African term Sankofa, which suggests that it is not harmful to go back in order to go ahead. And so Sankofa espouses that sometimes in order to go forward in our journey, we have to go back for those things that in our history that are comfortable and uncomfortable. We have to go back for those things that we've missed, some things that weren't included in the textbooks, some groups, some choirs, some choral figures, conductors, ensembles that have been excluded from the fabric of our history. So it's a wonderful practice for me. Again, as a as a practicing Afrofuturist, I also envision a future for Black people that is free of white supremacy and free of injustice on every front. And so I offer I offer much thanks, in fact, to our allies, our tried and true allies who have stood on the front lines and stood in the gaps and have done the real work to make our everyday experiences in this profession and in the arts at large to be more diverse and equitable for everyone that shows up in our classroom, for everyone who is interested in this art, for everyone who comes to this profession by way of their authentic identity and experiences. I'll lift up something else. So an obvious transfer that anyone can make to Afrofuturism, if you've been paying attention to pop culture, mostly everyone I know has seen Black Panther. And so the use of technology and the merging of worlds from the present to the ancestral plane allows us to imagine a future for Black people and to imagine a future that is imagine and produce a future that is free of injustice on every front. And how wonderful of a world is that? How wonderful, how much farther ahead would our profession be and our practices within the profession be if we can imagine a world and produce a world. Langston Hughes said it best, I dream a world.
I love how you're inspiring us to move forward with this Afrofuturistic approach. And this is something I've never thought of, combining those two. And I love the Black Panther analogy. What can people do? So share your hopes for the profession in all the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And those that are listening, give us some ideas of how we can show up as allies, how we can assist in that forward progress.
I would say that in order to do the real work, you have to read the work. And so that is going back for the foundational texts that speak to Black life, Black culture, Black art, and practices within those arenas. And so I would offer In Search of Our Mother's Gardens by Alice Walker, The Talented Tenth, W.E.B. Du Bois. I offer The Salt Eaters by Toni Cade Bambara. There are so many texts that speak to womanist ethics. And if you haven't, read, I'm trying to think of the name of it now.
Don't you love how it walks away? Titles walk
away. I love how it walks away, but I'll come to this.
Yes.
Professor Hildred Roach, Black American Music, Past and Present. Black Women Composers, A Genesis, Mildred Denby Green. The Music of Black Americans. The Music of Black Americans, Eileen Southern. Way Over in Beulah Land. Thank you, Dr. Andre Thomas. So go back for these really critical texts that allows us to not only imagine and produce futures for Black people, but to consider their experiences as valid and real. And that is an everyday inclusive practice for those of us that are music teachers, whether you're day 1 or year 35. When you honor the experiences and the identities of people who come into your classroom, into your realm of being and thinking and doing, it is an everyday inclusive practice to do that. Then you do the real work of dreaming the world. And so may there be more Afrofuturists in our profession. May there be more womanist ethics discovered and practiced well in our profession. May there be more curiosity. May there be more honest work. May there be more research, and may there be more performances, may there be more as we look back, and go back for the lessons that we didn't learn, as we go back around the mountain for the things that we didn't catch the first time. Sankofa, like I said, it is a lifelong practice for me. No one's an expert for it because we're always going back. And so by looking back, I think that going ahead will not just be an easier journey, but a more worthwhile one. So my hope for the profession is that it takes a bi-directional approach.
I feel like I would typically wrap up and ask you what's the one thing that matters, but I want the people listening to push the 30-second back button and go listen to what you just said one more time. More. This is so inspiring. And you've given us so many resources to go dig into and do the reading. I know I have a couple books I can't wait to download.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
This will be so good. Is there anything else? I mean, we could talk for hours, and we already decided you're coming back when your database is done. But is there anything else that you want the listener to know before we sign off today?
I think of the title. And you have to understand that that music ed matters only because you matter. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for showing up, Emmy, as someone who is doing the real work on this front and lifting up experiences of a vast array of people in our profession. And it gives us permission to do the deeper looking, to do the wider looking, to do the fine line walking and achieving balance. And the names and the people and the experiences that you lift up by way of this podcast, it will help us dream this world that we're looking forward to and actualize a lot of those elements with a sense of gratitude.
Thank you so much.
Not just for self, but for the other.
That is so well said. You matter, and I'm so glad you came on. Thank you for sharing your research, and I'm going to spend the weekend reading, so I don't know what you're doing. I'm going to go grab some new books. This was great. Thank you so much.
I'll be spending the weekend lesson planning, so I'll try and squeeze in a little bit of fun for Labor Day, but I'm giving myself grace. I am learning to listen to my body and my mind and spirit, and incorporating rest into this new life. Thank you to the NAP Bishop, Tricia Hersey Patrick, and the NAP Ministry for helping us discover rest as a form of resistance.
Yes. So good. Oh, I love it. This has been great. You'll be back though.
I will be back. Okay.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Khyle Wooten. I cannot wait to go get into some of those books. And I love that idea of looking back in order to look forward. I can't wait to see what the future looks like with you, my friends. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to True Change Alliance for making this possible. Go check out everything they have to offer. EmilyBirch.org/sponsors and click on the TCA logo. If you want to connect into the community deeper, or you just want to support the show, please leave us a review, like us. It helps more people find the show, and it helps us raise even more awareness for great things happening in music ed. Finally, if you want to join the family, you can support the show over at patreon.com/musicedmatters. No matter what you decide to do, you, my friend, you matter. We all know that music matters, especially the music of Black women composers and conductors. And I'll see you next time on the Music Ed Matters.